Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual design review panel meeting for Block 16 on Pier 8. I'm Jennifer Roth, a planner with the City of Hamilton and host of this meeting tonight, but panel member Jennifer Mallard will be the chair. Before going into the administration and purpose of this meeting, I would like to start with the city's land acknowledgement. The City of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase, 1792, between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. I'd like to take a moment to introduce the panel members for this unique design review panel process for Block 16 on Pier 8. Apologies to you folks, I'll only be giving a very abbreviated biography of each of you. On the panel, we have Jennifer Mallard, as I said, chair this evening. She's a principal at Diamond Schmidt. Ted Watson is a partner and architect at MJMA Architecture and Design, and will be the vice chair as required for the panel this evening. Calvin Brooke is an architect, urban designer, planner, and is the co-founder of the firm Brooke McElroy. Eldon Theodore is a planner and partner with MHBC. David Cluzia is an architect and the vice president of architectural design at Knorr Architects and Engineers. Tony Capito is a professional engineer and currently is the Mohawk College Research Chair in Sustainable Building Technologies. Petra Matar is an architect and principal at DPAI Architects here in Hamilton. Paula Hamilton is an architect with Toms and McNally Design. In addition to the panel members, we have the applicant team from Waterfront Shores Partners and city staff from the Municipal Land Development Office visible on the meeting this evening. As well, there are a few individuals observing the meeting, including city staff from the Planning Division, members of the public, and media. Just so you all are aware, you probably all saw the item come up saying that the meeting is being recorded. It will be uploaded to the project webpage later, end of this week. And for those who have speaking privileges this evening, please make sure if you're not speaking to keep your microphone muted. I would now like to let Ken Coit, the manager of Urban Design and Heritage, to provide a little more background on the DRP.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, panelists. This design review panel has been called to implement the City of Hamilton Council endorsed process outlined in the Pier 8 Block 16 Urban Design Guidelines. This process has required the proponent, Waterfront Shores Partners, to develop 3 tower designs for Block 16 on Pier 8, which were presented at a public information center and a first design review panel meeting, which were both held in March. The Urban Design Guidelines required each of the designs to demonstrate innovation in the following 3 areas: quality of life, sustainability, and exceptionalism, which is defined as the creation of a landmark building of exceptional design excellence that is emblematic of the renewal of Hamilton Harbor. At the March meeting, the panel heard presentations from Waterfront Shores Partners on 3 tower concepts: the cylinder, waves, and the lily. Generally, the panel commented in favor of the lily. They also requested more details of the materials and features of the building design, a firm commitment to a sustainability target for the project, and more details on public access and programming to be provided at this meeting in order for them to provide more fulsome comments. The focus of the panel today is to review this final building proposal that Waterfront Shores Partners has been working on for the past month, and to provide feedback on how the final design implements the Pier 8 block urban design guidelines. The feedback and advice heard today, along with comments from the public and technical staff comments, will be used to inform staff recommendations on a rezoning and official plan amendment that will go forward to the Planning Committee for a decision at a future date. With that, I'll hand it over to Jen Mallard to begin the panel.
Thanks, Ken. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second meeting of this design review panel. Jennifer Roth, can you please confirm that this session is being recorded?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
And to the panel members, are there any declarations of interest? I'll take silence as a no. Okay, thanks. Before getting into the staff presentation, we want to reiterate that the purpose of this panel is to provide urban design advice to the Planning Division staff and Waterfront Shores Partners on this iteration of the tower design for Block 16 at Pier 8. As stated in the mandate for this panel, we will be providing advice and feedback on this tower concept and specifically evaluating the proposal as it relates to the following questions. Number one, to what extent does this final proposed tower design implement the Pier 8 Block 16 urban design guidelines? Number two, to what extent does the final proposed tower design capture the standards and design criteria required to create a unique building with high quality design and exceptionalism? Number three, to what extent does the final proposed tower design portray innovation in sustainability and quality of life for occupants? And number four, to what extent does the final proposed tower design serve as a visual anchor and a regional metropolitan scale landmark? Moving on to the agenda item, which is the staff presentation. The city's development review planner on the file is Mark Kaler. He'll provide a brief presentation to recap the site and an overview of the process in relation to the proposed tower. Good evening, Mark. We're ready for your presentation, and please keep the presentation to under 10 minutes.
Morning. Again, my name is Mark Kaler. I'm Senior Planner with the Development Planning section of the Planning Division, and I'm the planner assigned to review the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for Pier 8 Block 16. So again, the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications are to propose a multiple dwelling with a maximum height of 45 stories or 147 meters on the Block 16 Pier 8 lands. So Block 16 is located within Pier 8. The outer area highlighted in yellow, that's the entirety of Pier 8 and 7 and 8. Which is north of Guy Street East in the north end of Hamilton. And the inner yellow area with the star in the middle, that's Block 16. So it's located at the northwest corner of Pier 8. It's currently occupied by a surface parking lot. So this is a view of the subject lands from earlier today. You can see there's some trees. It's currently a surface parking lot for the recreation uses that exist currently on Pier 8. So to the northwest, you have the Discovery Center. To the west, there's existing Williams Cafe building, some other commercial uses associated with a roller rink and ice skating rink in the winter, and a park that occupies the west portion of Pier 8. And here's a view southwest of the site. You can see the Port Authority building, a taller building, and the Guy Street Co-op, 6-story building. View to the southeast, another apartment building. And then to the east, you can see the more industrial portion of the port. So just a little bit of background on this process. It is a bit different than most official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications. So in September of 2019, there were minutes of settlement executed to resolve appeals of the zoning bylaw and draft platted subdivision, which were approved by council to implement the West Harbor secondary plan as it applies to Pier 7 and 8. The parties of the settlement agreed that the city would bring forward an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for Block 16 at a future public meeting to permit either a mid-rise or a high-rise building. And the settlement did not state that the city would approve this this concept, but that they would consider it at a future public meeting. So as part of the settlement, the maximum number of units within Pier 8 was to remain at 1,645, and a minimum of 15% of the dwelling units would be family units, which means 2 or more bedrooms. But as part of the settlement, with a proposed 45-story building for the site, this would result in an additional 150 family units above and beyond the 15%. So as part of phase 1 of this planning process to consider either a mid-rise or tall building on Block 16, there was Pier 8 Block 16 urban design guidelines, which built upon the previous work that was done through the Pier 7 and 8 urban design guidelines by the City of Hamilton. So some key considerations that came out of that Pier 8 Block 16 urban design study. There was the direction to recognize the public role of Block 16 and that it requires a high quality development of exceptional design. That the future development should create a metropolitan landmark and visual anchor at Pier 8 that would be emblematic of the harbor's renewal. It should express environmentally sustainable features, green design references, and have high quality landscaping. It should animate surrounding pedestrian areas, have active uses, and create a high quality public realm. It should offer a high quality of life for residents of all ages, including family-friendly unit design and generous outdoor space. And it should provide for transition and sufficient separation between the development and surrounding blocks within Pier 8. So the study also included an implementation process that Ken referred to. So as he mentioned, we have the actual guidelines, Pier 8 Block 16 guidelines adopted by council in August of 2021. Following that, there was a complete official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment submission to the city on November 9th, 2021. Following that submission, we had a statutory public meeting on February 15th. The feedback we received at that meeting was referred back to staff and the proponent for consideration as the design has progressed through the process. And then we had a public information center on March 8th, where the proponent presented 3 tower designs and received feedback from the public, which brought us to the first design review panel, which was on March 10th. And at that panel meeting, the panel provided feedback on those 3 tower designs. And now we're here, April 27th, second DRP. We have that final design, and the panel is now asked to provide staff with feedback on that final tower design. And following this, what will happen next is we're aiming to bring the final tower design back to Planning Committee for a decision that's targeted for September of 2022. So I'll just leave with this slide. Jennifer Mallard already read out these questions, but again, the purpose of today's panel is to provide us in the planning division with some feedback on these 4 questions as we work towards our staff report and public meeting at Planning Committee. So that concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Mark. We're now ready for the presentation from Bruce Corbera of KPMB and Luka Matutunovic of Purpose Building, who are representatives from Waterfront Shores Partners. Bruce and Luka will provide more detail about the final tower design concept. Please keep your presentation to 30 minutes. Bruce?
Thank you, Jennifer. We're very excited to come back to Design Review Panel 2. Having really reviewed your summary of comments and suggestions out of DRP 1. And at the same time, we're tracking everything that we're doing relative to the urban design guidelines that were developed by Brooke McElroy. What we have is one scheme that's based on the form of the lily, and you're seeing in the title slide a photo collage, really a digital collage of it in relationship to the competition scheme that we did for Waterfront Shores in 2018. Next, please. We actually have 3 speakers. We have always focused on the 3 lenses in bold: design excellence, which I'll talk about, but we've also introduced a much greater focus on the public realm and the integration with the microclimate and the idea of a green landscape. And Pat Hansen of GH3 is going to speak to that. Then, of course, Luka Matinovic will speak to sustainability and quality of life. And I will finish with a section on community building. What we heard last time, beside the 3 lenses, were the focus on the public realm and how to build and support and design for community within the building and between the building and all of Pier 8 and the North End. So that's what this presentation is about. Next, please. This is a recap, but a very key slide of the 360-degree views from the tower, from this one point, this pivotal point on the northwest corner of Pier 8, from a number of public vantage points that are really well known and very accessible to people. So they see this one point, which is also the termination. It's not really the termination, but it becomes part of the view looking north towards the waterfront on James Street from downtown Hamilton. And of course, there's off in the corner to the left, Cootes Paradise, which is really an extraordinary place, a place of nature. And Hamilton has always been on this. It has, the Pier 8 has a relationship between the industrial waterfront, which is being transformed, and nature on the other side, the site further west. Next, please. It's an extraordinary site. And I think the views from LaSalle Park, which is where we used to go when I lived in the North End, and from probably my favorite work of civic architecture by John Lyle, which we used to call the high level bridge, but you can see the tower way off on the left as you approach Hamilton. And the thing I would say is Lyle's work always connected his forms to the water, to the land, the escarpment, and the sky. And our tower is very much really inspired by Lyle, understanding that it'll be a tall element at the scale of the entire city, at the scale of the lake, and really a kind of beacon. And then it will change its character and really create integration with the ground plane of Pier 8. Next, please. And the lily, which is in Cootes Paradise, I mean, it's a supple form. It gives us undulations. It allows us to create slender profiles that are not all exactly the same on different elevations. And so there is a kind of elegance of the outline, which we think we have really begun to work with and push to this final version for this DRP2. Next, please. This is the aerial showing the competition scheme, the Discovery Center, Williams Cafe, the marina, the outdoor skating rink. It's a beautiful site. It has water pretty much all around it. And the tower is turned away to kind of look to the west, look frankly to Lyle's Bridge, which I love, and also to kind of look back over its shoulder to the downtown. The podium, which is really low, carries the scale down to relate to the 3-story and 2-story scale Discovery Center and the one-story scale of Williams Cafe, but it occupies the kind of promontory. It has to do with the way the roads are laid out, the way that the tower participates in the James Street corridor, but that the way you get there from James Street is on Guy Street and then what was called Discovery Drive. It now becomes Haida Avenue. And so it's really quite remarkable. You see it from a distance and then you approach it on an angle. Next. The site plan with the lily form, which kind of rocks and looks to the west and to the marina. And the podium really is trying to be part of and speak to the scale of the lower buildings to the west and to the hammer, which is the publicly accessible edge of all of Pier 8. What I really like about the overall Pier 8 is every street leads to the water, and the water's edge is totally public. It'll always be public. Next, please. You know, we redid this sort of aerial axo of all of the key elements, elements that you ask questions about. We're looking for resolution, refinement, more detail, but the same elements. And one of the key ones is the podium, which is a device which is helping a lot with the mitigation of wind, not only for the outdoor exterior amenity space, which we're going to show you a lot of on that roof terrace, which is the third floor, but it also creates a kind of figure which allows everything below it to have its own expression. We previously were trying to contain the podium within a system of vertical elements, much like the tower, and we abandoned that as a response to things about creating smaller identities, clearer identities all around the podium underneath that datum level. So you'll see that. And the tower penetrates through the podium, so it affects the lobby, which is really spectacular because it was in the cylinder, but it's even more interesting in the lily because it creates different kinds of spaces below the podium roof. Next, please. Just to show you that we're working with RWDI on wind studies. This is a CFD model, and you're seeing up above the tower and podium, and then lower you're seeing the ground level. And of course, red is not good, and we have to mitigate, so we know we can see the red, say, in the winter conditions. What's interesting is the predominant winds are southwest and northeast, and that if you look at the lower left image in the summer, the conditions that we really want to mitigate are on the northwest and the southeast. They're sort of diagonally opposite. And I think the great thing that we learned is that we were worried about was the entrance on the southwest is green and there's a blue at the building, which is all really, really good. And this is without the mitigation measures that GH3 is working on. So it just gets better from here. I'd also say that on the upper diagrams, you're seeing the podium outline, the larger tray through which the lily tower form sits and passes through it, that we are really planning on creating greater planting to increase the blue on the roof, on the largest part of the gathering area, which is on the lakeside for larger events and so on. You'll see that we have a lot of detail on that, and we want to completely mitigate, you know, the red in the winter, and there may be some convertible pavilions. I think you should still be able to eat outside even if it's windy on that terrace. Okay, next, please. And this is for residents. And then these are, you know, really aerodynamic. I mean, the shape of the building was about keeping it round, not square, to instinctively mitigate between downdrafts by allowing the wind to go around it. And the red is what we're trying to mitigate against. And on the left side, you're looking at in the muse, but it's not including the landscape that GH3 has. There are lots of trees, and in the greenway, that will change. And then in the northwest corner, the diagram on the right, That's near the sort of northern entrance, and we believe we can mitigate that with planting as well and with the screening that is in the GH3 scheme. So these are very informative, but we thought you should see it because you know, it really gives you a graphic expression of what's happening in the building, and you can see the downdrafts being captured by the podium. So that's working extremely well. Blue is good. Next. The view on James Street, we have to show this because it's so important. It's the link from the downtown and the north end looking in. And what I really like is that the center line is not ended or terminated. It's actually beyond being a tangent to the actual Lilly Tower. The Lilly Tower stands to the side and the air rights kind of go right past it. Next, please. And then this view, which is still just the crude model showing the white massing of the rest of Pier 8, but you can see the step massing of the Lilly and how the 30-story element has a kind of ripple effect of additional curves. And we think that the transition between the primary tower and the 30th tower in plan and in elevation is very graceful. We're looking for a very fluid way in which the tower could grow from a smaller floor plate up high to a lower, the lower element with the larger floor plate. Next, please. And then there was a request for how the building would appear at night and the implication of the potential for it to be a landmark and a beacon. And we want it to be a quiet beacon, a very elegant beacon. And you can see at the very top where we have the mechanical room and elevator overrun that there is a roof to the outline of the Lilly form, but it's still contained within the vertical elements that go up to hold it up. And so there's not much light or any light going up into the night sky. All the light is kind of held within that kind of temple-like top, and the soffit will be softly lit. I think it should just be quiet. You should see it, but it shouldn't be shouting at anyone. And of course, on the ground level, you see it's brighter. We have a very high, you know, 7-meter high space in the lobby, and it's very transparent. It's like a kind of conservatory on the marina and on the water. Okay, next, please. Series of images of the ground level, and this really starts to begin the discussion on the public realm. But you're looking at the main entrance, which is a cylinder, and you get the effect of the tower plan kind of rippling as it heads towards the bay. And there are glass screens, which Pat will talk about, but the core is wood and it's acoustic. The space is very tall and transparent, like you will look through the lobby from to the sky over the harbor. And it sits as a kind of pavilion. The podium is more of a pavilion with a horizontal expression at the third floor with a glass windscreen, and then community facilities at grade on the right-hand side addressing the greenway. Next, please. You can see the facade of the building. Each of the vertical elements occupies, you could say, like a 2-foot square, but it's shaped. It's actually concave and flat, narrow, but it gets us to our glazing ratio that we were after. We're at 60%, and you can see the other element is the 4th floor canopy, which goes in and out. That has a lot of flexibility to really deal with any of the wind conditions and the comfort on the amenity level. It's a kind of canopy to the amenity floor. And then you're seeing in the foreground where the umbrellas are a proposal for a restaurant onto the greenway. You're looking down to the Mews on the right-hand side, where we did a kind of reflected plan of live-work townhomes. Next, please. And then the marina shot, really seeing the, you know, it's quite beautiful because you get the marinas far more developed, much greater numbers of boats than I ever remember growing up in Hamilton. And the building then has this kind of copper bronze color. It is light, but we think it'll really capture the west light, for example, and there's reflection in the glass. So we see parts where you don't see the reflection. Well, those are the recessed balconies. And so part of the idea of creating a quiet civic form based on the lily was about minimizing the reading of projecting balconies and a lot of things happening. This form of this building, the 30 and the 45 floors, are also quite efficient and very effective in terms of unit planning, and really sort of allows us to have the flexibility with the lily form to make slight adjustments as the building really tries to address the market. Next. Okay, design excellence is the first lens. Let's go through this. These are some of the questions that came up through the design review 1. Next, please. And the penthouse, we looked at this and tried to make the most elegant resolution at the top of the building, what I say is a kind of temple, but it's really the mechanical. It's a very high floor. That's like 30 feet at that point. So everything is under the roof, and you just see the light playing off of the verticals, and you'll be able to look right through it because the mechanical is pulled back from the edge of the building. Next. You know, just the diagram so you could see the penthouse plan. It's very, very simple. It's just pulled back, and it kind of is like an annular ring almost inside the form of the lily, and you see the form of the tray, what we call the tray, which is the 3rd floor of the podium. Next, please. Close up of that night view. Next, please. And then the window wall ratio and materials, you know, we've gone over this. We are trying to balance, you know, views and light on a waterfront site. And we're hitting, go to the next, this is our ratio at 60%. They're 5 foot wide voids and windows, and the solid pieces at the backside where they contact the building are 2 feet wide, and then they're sculpted, as you can see in the diagram on the lower left, to be very narrow on the front. This allows more light to come through, but it also gives the verticals a kind of inherent slenderness. Next. And just, this was a study, this isn't a rendering, it was a study as we were examining the facade ratio. Next, please. And then we thought we would show what it would look like from the inside. So 5 foot windows and 2 foot solids. Next. And operable windows low. That's what I have in my building. They don't obstruct the view. And then this is essentially, it's the elevation of the Muse, where you get a double order of 6 townhouses and then a very extraordinary unit on the far right, which is in a kind of bullnose rounded shape, and the tower sits back. Then the transitional element is the canopy up on the 4th floor overlooking the terrace. There's a pavilion up there, there's planting, there's urban agriculture up there. And you can sort of see you'll see the planting scheme that goes with it. But we're pleased that the scaling of the townhouses and the Muses deals with the scale, I think, better in the reflected mirrored planning and facade development relative to the tower. Next. Terraces and balconies, we talked about that at DRP 1. Our position is quite similar. Go to the next, please. We're just showing the family size units. They're all the 2 and 3 bedroom ones. So the beige and pink ones, and they are, you know, they are all getting the bigger units get sort of southeast light, which we think is really great, and corner units obviously for 2 bedrooms. But you know, there's lots of work. Anyone who's done a condominium tower knows, you know, just how much goes into this. But this is where we've landed with the lily. Next, please. And again, this is like, we just took one of the units. You can see it keyed to the plan in the top left. And it's, let's say this reflects the principles of planning. There's so much work to go into it, but we think that we're getting a high performance building envelope, obviously Energy Star appliances, the concept of outdoor living rooms and the recessed balconies, lower monthly utility bills, and the possibility of working from home. So very simple plan. Next, please. And then, areas of more consideration of work, and, it's a constant improvement iteration, but, this was an older study, but we just wanted you to see like the depth, the width of the piers here are from the cylinder a long time ago, and they're wider now. They're 2 feet wide, and that reduces that. And then we're also as much as we'd love to have 100% glazing on this wall, it'll probably be reduced. It'll be reduced. There'll be a solid return piece on the right side for sure. Okay, next, please. So the exterior lighting strategy, I mean, you saw the exterior view, but we have lots of work to do on this. But the idea is to create transparency through the lobby, which we think opens up the public realm, coming from Haida Avenue around to the other side to the Hammer, and really kind of creates this very interesting room that gets a view of the bay, the marina, and John Lyle's Bridge, if you can see that far. Next, please. The core will be lit. And then this is critical about the landscape and prevailing winds. So let's go to the next. I'm handing it over to Pat Hansen.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, so we're starting with the overall plan, landscape plan for Pier 8. This is slightly modified from the competition entrance, but it really illustrates the core idea or the generating idea for our landscape. Notwithstanding, the Greenway was a request of the master plan, but we really find it was kind of a sort of a fundamental starting point for the landscape. We called this in the competition, we called it the zipper, which is kind of the idea of a fissure running east-west through the site. And the kind of zigzag pattern that's a result of the idea of the zipper really starts to generate paving pattern that is integrated for all blocks of the site. So something that can be pulled up to the north and to the south of the site to have a kind of larger kind of idea of planting and paving pattern and surface through the entire site. You see the Greenway or the zipper as a kind of urban sponge with really intensive tree planting, where trees manage stormwater through the storage, through their leaves, their bark, the soil, and really cleanse the stormwater through this system before, in the case of a greater amount of stormwater that would be managed and mechanically moved off the site. The next slide, if you could turn to it. There's a sort of close-up of block 16 and the neighboring block to the east, block 1. And shows here the kind of opportunity that there is to sort of pull that paving pattern and have it kind of follow the shape of the building, which really starts to amplify the overall kind of architecture of the building. And we think it's an opportunity to really unify ground plane and architectural expression. It also shows the sort of extension of the zipper to the south of it, and also how we can pull that paving pattern and landscape strategy, planting bed strategy, up through what we refer to as the muse, which is the smaller, more intimate space between block 16 and block 1. Next slide, please. Bruce mentioned winds, so I think the Greenway goes and the kind of idea, the kind of planting that we're suggesting in the Greenway goes a long way to mitigating winds, actually really offering a completely different sort of microclimate on site that's very different than what one will find when you're walking along the shores of Lake Ontario, but in this case really kind of manages wind and microclimate on the southwest and southeast corners of the site. Next slide. And then as we move a little bit further north, we're suggesting, you'll see in future views, a slumped glass structural wind screens that kind of are positioned around the entry that break up the winds as the wind picks up potentially speed on the sort of northwest side of the site, but really actually really manages the sort of microclimate and is also part of that kind of shaping of the spatial experience at the ground level. Next slide. So this is a view which we included because we really wanted to give a real sense that there is a kind of an immersive experience being in the zipper. So here we are sort of in the kind of middle of that passageway where you see a selection of native species, naturalized species, and forest floor that really all contribute to make a kind of very immersive experience and kind of adjust the microclimate in this part of the site. Next slide. And then a view looking up the Mews where we have grade-related units. Again, we're pulling through this kind of idea of a sort of similar paving and tree planting strategy, in this case with sort of lower shrubs that mark a kind of bit of an outdoor front garden for these grade-related units, high enough to sort of screen the equipment of daily life like bicycles and barbecues, but the goal here is really to make this intimate, community-focused, neighborhood-focused space that's comfortable for all. Next slide. And then this is the restaurant, potential restaurant area that Bruce was referring to. It's a kind of very kind of engaging part of the building. Again, you can see views up through the Mews, up to the north and over to the west. And here we are relying on shading, obviously, from the planting of the zipper, but also a proposal here for some green curtains actually hung off the wall to allow for future management of, further management of solar. Okay, next slide. And then a view of the entrance. Again, there's just sort of a great opportunity to unite, hardscape and the shape of the building. So in this case, we sort of we extended the paving pattern and hopefully the actual surface of the exterior material into the public spaces of the ground floor of the building. And then the next slide, which is the final slide, shows a kind of what the potential of these kind of curved glazed windscreens can be, that they can be spatial, experiential, but still allow for lots of visual continuity on this corner of the site. And with that, I'll turn it over to Luca.
Thanks, Pat. So I'm going to get right to the point and try to keep this as simple and direct as possible. We took a lot of great feedback that was received from DRP1. And one of the key elements for us was that we needed to be more specific. So we're going to get into the specifics. And we think we made a lot of progress on a number of really important items. And we think we'll be happy. You'll be happy with what we've come up with. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've been reflecting on is, what are the specific targets? How do we get there, and how can we enhance the livability for residents? Next slide. We wanted to reflect again on the journey that Hamilton's been, and that this project really is about acceleration. That in declaring a climate emergency and acting on it, we are building on past successes, and we're really taking it to the next level. And one of the things that Hamilton has been focused on is to increase the number of new and existing high-performance state-of-the-art buildings that are energy efficient and can adapt to a changing climate. And we believe we've delivered exactly on those desired outcomes. Next slide. Starting from that, what is typical development, and recognizing that the approved master plan for Pier 8 already establishes a higher than typical level of performance. And block 16 really accelerates beyond that in three really important ways. The first is that we're going much broader than what is typical. This is one of the most robust, broad, and comprehensive sustainability frameworks that we have been operating under, these special urban design guidelines that apply to block 16. So we are tackling a far greater range of sustainability issues. The second point is that we are going fairly deep on a number of them. And the third is that all of that will be delivered through a very robust verification process. So we are not just setting out to talk about things that might happen. We will prove that these outcomes are ultimately delivered. Next slide, please. So what does that really mean? We are doing something that has never been done before. Block 16 will be the first triple certified residential development of its kind in Canada. That means LEED Gold certification, Energy Star multifamily high-rise residential certification, and WELL building standard certification. The really important takeaway here is that third-party verification. All of these standards require us throughout the design and construction and occupancy stages to prove that we are delivering on the intent. And that is on top of the already established level of engagement and review that this special approvals process has created. Next slide, please. We're going to talk to you about what that really means in terms of specifics, and we'll organize that in four really, four broad sustainability focus areas: energy efficiency and low carbon, air quality and thermal comfort, water quality efficiency, and then resilience, health, and well-being. Next slide, please. So in terms of importance to climate action, we start with this because this is what will get us to where we need to be. These are the strategies that we will be employing. Bruce mentioned the moderate glazing ratio. There will be high performance double glazing. We will be improving the opaque wall performance. In-suite ventilation, heat recovery. We will be driving down stack effect and reducing the amount of energy needed for corridor pressurization. We are deploying a hybrid geothermal or geo-exchange heating and cooling system, and that is the centerpiece of the energy efficiency and carbon strategy. And then within the units, low flow domestic hot water fixtures, all Energy Star certified appliances, relying on that ground field to preheat some of that domestic hot water, LED lighting, occupancy sensors, and then all of the minutia of the details in terms of the equipment selection. Next slide. So what does that really mean? We are delivering, based on preliminary energy modeling and technical analysis, a level of energy use intensity, total amount of energy that the building is anticipated based on these kinds of models to use, that is somewhere between 30 and 40% better than what would be typical of a Hamilton condominium development that was being put up today. Next slide. Because of that reliance on the energy exchange between the ground and the use of efficient heat pumps, this is the signature move that we are delivering a level of operational carbon emissions reduction that is 50 to 70% better than what is typical. And there is a 8 to 12 range of greenhouse gas intensity per meter squared of occupied area. But we're not just stopping there. So next slide. This is the energy modeling, just for reference, that was done to inform those performance estimates that we've developed at this stage. Next slide. We're also considering a plan for how the building can completely eliminate fossil fuels over time and baking that into the design of the mechanical and electrical infrastructure. And we are very mindful that operational carbon is part of it, but embodied carbon is where the market needs to shift next. And these are the strategies that will be used: a combination of low carbon concrete, more than typical use of structural steel as a replacement to concrete, recycled content for that steel, locally sourced material, and then the idea of reducing longer term emissions by having flexibility and adaptability in the layouts. This will in turn deliver, next slide, roughly 10 to 20% lower embodied carbon than what is typical. So we're focusing on both operations and embodied. Next slide. In terms of air quality and thermal comfort, we're going to speed up through some of these. There is a wide range of strategies that are part of the design right now that will deliver improved indoor air quality. And a lot of that has to do with the kinds of materials that we will be selecting that are not off-gassing as much, that have health and environmental product declarations. And then the additional layer here that I think goes above and beyond and is quite innovative is the idea of thermal comfort monitoring, post-occupancy surveys, and really engaging with the occupants to ensure that we are continuing to operate the building under those ideal scenarios. Next slide, please. Going into water quality and efficiency, the well building standard really is the centerpiece here, and it really includes a number of requirements that will elevate the level of quality beyond what is typical. And then in terms of dealing with some of the pandemic issues and obviously mold, moisture management, there's certain elements incorporated there. And then in terms of absolute water use reduction, that will come through a combination of indoor water fixture savings and no potable water used for irrigation. Next slide, please. And what I mean by no potable, all of the water that will be used that is necessary to deliver the landscape design will be stormwater. And then finally, really important piece, resilience, health, and well-being. And Bruce mentioned this is all about quality of life. So again, a number of elements from the urban design guidelines that we have innovated above and beyond and taken elements from the well building standard and even things like the Toronto Green Standard, the idea of providing more than typical backup power and a refuge area in the case of a power off event, that people can seek shelter in an amenity space that is provided with its own heating and cooling systems that are backed up by emergency power, having an emergency management plan so that residents know what to do in the event of various situations. And then really key piece that this building is being designed to operate under the climate of today, but also the climate of 2050. So the building's mechanical systems will be sized based on future weather predictions. Next slide, please. Daylight, dimmable circadian lighting, and the 360 views of nature that some of the renderings have shown is how we will deliver exceptional daylight and views. Next slide. And then, tying it back to quality of life, movement, mental health, a lot of the pieces that we talked about at DRP1 that come from the well building standard are captured here. And some of the programming that has been envisioned really moves beyond typical amenities and really speaks to mental health, restorative thinking, the idea of communal gardening, and then really thinking ahead to what the future of mobility will look like, and not just thinking about bikes, but also providing adequate space and a capacity for electrical bikes, and an opportunity for the residents to work on their bikes in the building itself. Next slide, please. So in summary, this will be a healthy, resilient, low carbon, triple certified, and third-party verified building. And in a word, we believe that is transformational for Hamilton. Thank you.
We're running a tiny bit over time, about 8-9 minutes over time. So I encourage you to
We're
through the rest.
very close, but we have a lot of material. One of the takeaways was the community spaces, the amenity spaces, the interface of the public and residents. Go to the next, please. This is a plan of the third floor. We spent a lot of time on this, and if you look at it in detail, you'll see that all the interior spaces around the core all have a kind of connection to the outdoor terrace. In the two bottom corners on the southwest and southeast are areas where we think we can really have urban agriculture. There's a kids space on the southeast, having access to the outdoors. And you're seeing a number of elements on the east side, which are really the ventilation and skylights are basically ventilating the townhouses, but creating these kind of sandwich walls, which create private outdoor gathering areas that look to over the mews. And then there's an element, you know, the big party rooms, amenity spaces are facing the biggest deck where we have the wind issue that we pretty confident we're going to really control. And then there's a covered outdoor dining area, which is where those two long tables are. And then there's the prow, which is way up at the top overlooking the bay. Next, please. So we've zoned it. Just some images. These are not so rendered so much as they are conceptual about the kids' play area looking out over the urban agriculture, and you know, the party room where you really just want it to be very flexible. There's a prep, but also teaching kitchen just beyond the far right wall that supports the party room, but also supports the outdoor dining. Next, please. So an image, this is the southeast corner. You see all the elements coming together, the planters, which are benches, the planting areas, the kids areas, the canopies, the windscreen. Next, please. And then in the lobby, it's a big space. We want it to be really generous so people really have settings within which they can gather, and the wood walls on the right are all acoustic, and the ceiling will probably be acoustic, but you can see the kind of the landscape theme on the ground plane coming right through the lobby. Next, please. Just another view. I mean, in my lobby in the building I live in, people work in there. So it gets great light. It has tables, working space, and it's big. We expect a lot of people coming to events and visitors coming. And that's how the public accesses it. But security is a very important thing today. And in my building with my condo association, it's a critical thing that we're constantly monitoring. Next, please. And then just the idea that there's one covered area. There may be more, but I think we need one for sure that gives you that incredible view out over the bay, within which you could imagine a large party or a kids event. I mean, it's a landscape of places. I don't think it's just a big open deck. And beyond that, you see where those people are way out beyond. That's where I think people will walk to, and there'll be some chaises, and you'll get west light, the last setting sun. Next. Ground floor plan, very, very important. One of the big moves beyond on the Muse side, you see the reflection of the plan. The unit at the top is residential live work, where you get the half round kind of space. And then the colored pink areas are the two areas that are, you see the non-residential where the restaurant is, and Pat talked about it. It's in the renderings. You see the tables and chairs outside, and then there's a room at grade, which could have, but it has to be controlled through security, access to a meeting room. So that could be for the greater community, or the restaurant could do a private event in that room. I think it would be very successful. And then, you know, the other elements, the carport, you know, the loading dock, it's under a covered roof. And it is in a prime location, but it really, I think, will work extremely well, and it'll get the west sunlight underneath the podium roof. There are two entrances, one to the water side, one to towards Williams and the skating rink, and then you see the two curves of the lily really creating different places in the lobby itself. Next, please. Okay, this is the last part of it. Live work, you asked for how they're townhouses and how do they become live work. Go to the next, please. It's just a set of plans on the ground. The two lower ones are live, so it's like a two-story, two-bedroom townhouse, and up above we're saying that the conversion might be this, where you separate the workspace. It could be a startup office, or you know, you just imagine, or you could work downstairs but you live upstairs. And we wanted to do it with the least number of physical changes, so where the plumbing chases, you would have a bathroom or a kitchen, and so that's the philosophy of the approach on conversion. Next, please. This is the last image on the water. How much time do we have left, Jennifer? Do we have a few minutes?
We're now into the question period.
Okay, just so you know, if we have time somewhere later, we have a 4-minute video of the public realm and amenity space. But I think at this point you understand it. But if we have it, we'd love to show it.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you. Thank you, Bruce and Pat and Luca, for your presentations. At this point, we'll give an opportunity for each panel member to seek clarifications on any technical points that may require further explanation. Let's try to keep these keep this section brief so that we can reserve more time for the end and maybe get to that video if we have time. So brief questions and brief responses from the panel if possible. We'll start with Eldon. Do you have any questions?
Thanks, Jennifer. And I do have a couple questions. Thank you, Bruce and team, for your presentation. Just a couple of questions of clarity to help me just understand the proposal a bit better. You touched a bit about the materiality of the building, and I was wondering if you could elaborate any further, if there's any significance or any connection that that the materials have that tied to the area that you can help me understand as it relates to the narrative of the proposal.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're really looking at, we would really look at locally sourced brick, maybe press brick from Ariscraft, that's up near Kitchener-Waterloo. I think for wood, I think we'd really look at, Ontario hardwoods. That would be maple and oak. And I think if there's any stone, it would be Ontario limestone. So it's really of this place. The facade of the building is metal, and it's pre-painted. But the things that we think that we would showcase would be the more natural materials, and then kind of there's a sort of rawness. I think one of the key issues will be what's on the ground, because that comes right into the building, and we were talking about how to make the translation between what could possibly be precast pavers outside with that the undulating pattern, but how does that translate into the lobby of the building? Is it literally the same material? I've seen some projects I really like that bring an exterior material into the interior. So we're working on it, but we that's where we're starting.
Okay, no, thank you. The second connected to that was whether there was any thought or whether you explored alternative facade expressions before coming up to this design. I know in the previous presentation, and forgive me, I wasn't there, but I did get to see it on video. There were 3 tower expressions, and as you came up with this final design, was there a consideration of alternatives?
Yeah, we did. We had a tapered sort of bullnose, very smooth. It was just sort of a V with a bullnose shape, and we had a flatter one, which was a reverse scallop. But that move was really set up for the cylinder. It was really classical. Okay, the one when we started working on the Lily, what you really want is something that can take both the concave and the convex curves in a for us, very repetitive way, which we thought it accentuates the line of the perimeter, and the way in which it's articulated, which is narrow face outside and sculpted faces back to the 2 feet, does some really interesting things. It it gives us the solidity we want, but it also sort of opens the view. When you get to that 5-foot window, you're not in a deep piece, but it's actually set back. And that was really, really important. So yeah, we did look at some others, and it looked too flat in many of them. And then this strategy for that particular shape works really well with the lily form. That was our view on it.
Thank you. And my last question, just I know in the previous presentation there was discussion about public access opportunities, and I just wonder if you could just clarify which areas are public or publicly accessible, and is there any, I guess, progress in relation to that area?
Yeah, I mean, put it this way. I don't know if you've ever lived in a condo. I do, and no one can just come into the lobby of the building, you know, and we have designated entrance for Uber Eats, and we have around the clock security all the time. And not only that, you can't even get to the elevators. You have to have a fob to even get into the elevator lobby, because there are a lot of people following other people into our building, and the condo corporation just said we're going to stop that. What's truly public is all the public realm around the building. I think the Muse, the restaurant, is a very straightforward, you know, place. I think the idea that the public, meaning the residents of the North End or any other part of the city or the rest of Pier 8, might want to book that room, I think that would be fine, and it's a kind of good neighbor policy. But I think all the security clearances would have to be made. We're living in a very different time, and we're certainly not taking anything up to the top of the roof. I mean, if you think for a little bit about the security and economics of that, and the failure of so many of them, except in maybe other denser metropolitan cities, it's just not a strong proposition. So ours is very much about the public realm, the public landscape, the sort of mitigation of wind, you know, the greening of the site with coniferous things, bicycling. We want that to be present. We could do more with that on our site plan. I think we want to express the values that have driven the project, and hopefully the public enjoys it. The landscape, that's really, I think, really legitimate.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Eldon. Over to Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Bruce, and your team for an excellent presentation. Certainly from a sustainability lens, which I'll be coming at, I'm pleased that at least you've made some significant improvements here. I think there's still more to go, and we'll maybe get a chance to talk about that. But I do have a couple of questions. One of the, there's a certain simplicity about a geo-exchange system. There's boreholes in the ground. There's heat pumps somewhere in the building. There's some pipes that connect all those things, and there's lots of controls and other things that happen. But I think there's an opportunity in this location, particularly along that greenway, to think about a geo-exchange system. But I need to understand the term hybrid. I haven't heard that term associated with geo-exchange or geothermal systems. I'd just like to understand that. And also, second, there didn't seem to be an effort on any type of rainwater, stormwater harvesting, which could lead to toilet flushing. I mean, that's pretty well a given today in many buildings. Certainly there's a lot, you have to keep things separate from potable water and otherwise, but I just wondered about those two things. What does hybrid mean? And what is, was there any consideration for rainwater harvesting?
Sure, Tony. So hybrid means that not that less than 100% of the peak and annual heating and cooling and domestic hot water loads will be met by the geo-exchange system. The balance of it will come from conventional energy generation means. That's what it means. So it is a hybrid in that there will be on day one gas-fired equipment that will satisfy a portion of the peak and annual. So I hope that answers your first question. And the second one, gray water toilet flushing is not under consideration right now, but all of the landscape irrigation, and there's quite a considerable amount of it, will be provided with stormwater. So there is a zero potable water use for irrigation.
Okay, and maybe just a one B along the hybrid piece there. What was the restriction that would still required you to have gas-fired equipment? Because once you're partway, it's not that challenging conceptually to get all the way.
Yeah,
And what was there that put a roadblock in there?
Yeah, great question. So there is a density of load that comes from this amount of height that and the amount of available site area that we are working with. So there's a certain constraint there, and then under these circumstances and given what we're doing with load reduction and the level of investment that requires. The ground that's available cannot meet 100%. And so then the next follow-up is, well, what are you doing with the peak? And there are significant spatial limitations in a tower form of trying to do something like air source heat pumps to satisfy sort of a low carbon point there. They don't work at design day conditions. And so then we're back to electric resistance, which we didn't think made a whole lot of sense. It might in the future if escalating taxes and costs, and that's what we meant with that sort of transition plan piece. And so we felt that on balance, given how much we can provide and the limitations of what the other options are, that what we've been able to achieve and drive it as low as we have, we think is a success.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Luca. Over to Paula. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. Thank you for a great presentation. I'm going to try and be really quick. Touching on a couple of comments Luca made, I believe you said that the intent is to eliminate fossil fuels over time. Is that correct?
I guess maybe a better or more precise way of saying that, Paula, is that we will enable or we would not preclude the building in doing that. And so there's ways that you can design a building that makes that transition really expensive or really complicated or really intrusive. And we are taking steps to remove some of those barriers. But that would ultimately be up to the condo corporation to actually deliver.
What would the steps be?
What would those enabling steps be?
Yes.
So one of them is thinking about the kinds of temperatures of the circulating fluid. And so by using in-suite heat pumps as opposed to fan coils, we are making that transition a little bit more possible. Looking at where future electrical service to electrify the remainder of the fossil fuels would sit on site and where it could make its way through the building is one other example. And then the third one is just thinking through sort of provisionally and spatially where that equipment might need to live in the mechanical penthouse. So those are sort of the notional ideas of what we would think about for that.
Thank you. You had said that the intent is to reduce longer term emissions by having flexibility in the layouts. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. The idea that over time you could design a structural system and core and the location of shear walls that would make the combining of units potentially more feasible than what is typical in the future. So that would be one example, and that may when you look at the life cycle emissions of doing typical operations and maintenance and capital renewal, we think that again is an enabling move that may make things simpler in the future. But there's a lot, as Bruce said, to the space layouts and unit layouts that still needs to get resolved.
Thank you. Is there any consideration to using a cladding system that incorporates photovoltaic cells?
We looked at it. We don't think it's the best use of the technology. There are, or what I should say is that we think that there are strategies that deliver better return on investment and go further in reducing carbon, and building integrated PV, we don't think will move the needle as much as putting a lot of effort in optimizing the geo-exchange system.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions for Bruce. Is it your intent to use curved glass in some components of the building? The renderings imply that curved glass is being used, particularly at the base of the building, and I wanted to just confirm that that would be the intent, as opposed to segmented glass.
I think we've got a lot to go through, but I think that, you know, the beauty of what GH3 has been doing is that it's a kind of landscape metaphor. It's like a ripple. So there may be a combination of straight and curved pieces that give you the effect. And we're working really closely with RWDI. So we really want to do, I think you want to do enough that it's present, but not overdo it. And how many pieces do we need to get the results we want? And what is the, I don't know, the spatial effect of all these glass kind of windshields, you know, like I like them, but I don't want so many of them. I want to have the design have the right number of them, and they may involve curved glass. There's a lot to go through. It might help the structural stability of the pieces as well. So, you know, to us, they're sort of environmental art pieces, you know, so those are all of it, like the number of them, yes, curved, but how many do you really need? Do we have them exactly in the right location? I think RWDI has said generally, you know, we're really improving the comfort level, and whether we do it in flat or curved, I mean but you know, the rendering showed curved. I mean, it's really elegant. I thought that it was like the shape of the building coming to the ground and having an influence on life on the ground. So
Yeah, that organic component, I think, you know, it's really important in order to carry forth the lily theme. So really love the look of it in the renderings. Just my last comment is the top of the tower is really beautiful. And I just wonder if there's any possibility of including some sort of program element up there so that the residents could perhaps go to the top of the tower as well. Just a thought.
yeah, don't know what to say. One time I climbed by myself to the roof of the Chrysler Tower in New York, and I actually got up in it, and there was nothing there. I don't know how to answer that. It's a Zen moment up there. That's all I can say. The sun sits on the top of the tower. I may go up there. I may have a secret little hatch where I go up at the end of every day and just look out towards John Lisle.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. David, do you have any questions?
Thanks, Bruce, Pat, Luca. Great presentation. It's pretty fulsome. I don't have many questions. The only question I maybe have is there any consideration for alternative restaurant locations, maybe with more of a water view?
I think one of the things that if you really look at the site plan and the way everything steps to the south towards the marina, you'll get that. But we were really using the location because it gets the south light to be supporting the community on the greenway. So that we thought, if there's no building directly to the south of this, there's a triangular landscape piece, and so we're trying to block the wind, screen the things, keep the views open to the boats, which is really beautiful. I mean, I think the marina is spectacular on this site. So we think we can do both, actually.
I don't really have any other questions. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Calvin?
Yeah, just one very mundane question, but great presentation, and really impressed with the development of the design. Luca, I think this is for you. It's just in terms of the parking garage, the extent of electrification for battery-powered vehicles. What's being planned?
So there is a plan for 10% of provided parking spaces to be electrified on day one, and provisions be made, roughing in conduit runs for full electrification in the future.
Okay, thank you. That's it for my questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Luca. Petra, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough, and it was very nice to see a lot of the thinking behind a lot of what we saw. When we got the presentation, we just were presented with images, and it's very nice to see the thoughts behind it. My question is more for Luca, but also possibly for Bruce. I know there were some figures being pulled up about how this building is performing better than other buildings in Hamilton and other developments being built right now. My question really is, how does it compare to what's done on landmark buildings, other major cities, both nationally and internationally? That's more my question. And that question also goes to formally. How does that formally compare to other landmark buildings being built?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. Maybe Bruce has some other things to add. In terms of carbon, I think internationally, Canada is a leader in sort of shifting away from energy efficiency to focus on what, it's not a proxy metric. It is let's focus on what really matters, which is carbon emissions. And that is why you see reflected in the design a greater emphasis on carbon reduction, not just energy efficiency. We go further and deeper on carbon than we do on just energy efficiency, because that's what we think matters. This idea, or this level of somewhere between 8 and 12 kilograms of carbon is, I would say, locally and nationally a leading range of performance. It is not the best that the best buildings in Canada and the world have certainly achieved more than that. But I think it is really important to, again, think of this in the context of market-driven development. That this is not a institutional investor, that this is not a city investor or a federal entity. And so there are some commercial limitations there. And I think if you look at the space of commercial residential or market-driven residential development, we are, I would say, in the top 10%, the top 10th percentile of development in Canada.
Thank you for that. Another question for you, Luca. In terms of resilience and durability, how will this building age from a durability and resilience standpoint? How will it adapt to the future of Hamilton, especially us being one of the cities that are going to be experiencing more and more extreme heat in the future? So how is that 2050 ready for that?
Great question. My cheeky response is, as well as the Condo Corp manages it and funds the capital renewal plan. But the things that we are doing to help that happen and to, again, this idea of enabling activities, certainly durability and material selection will be a part of it. Specifically to your question of sort of the climate. It's a fairly straightforward exercise for us to run a 2050 weather file and to run the energy model through that to determine how big we need to make cooling systems to deal with that 2050 peak day. So that is kind of how that infrastructure component will be looked at. And again, by using modular design and really good part load performance, and breaking up into smaller pieces of equipment, and this is where the geofield really lends itself well, we will still be able to achieve excellent operational efficiency today, but have that flexibility for the future. So hopefully that answers the question, but there may be something that I haven't quite tackled. Feel free to follow up.
Yeah, I do have like a follow-up to that from a building envelope standpoint as well. How does that also hold up to the future and the durability, especially that the residents will have to, and the condo corporation will have to deal with this in the future?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to construction quality. There's a design component to it and a construction quality component to it. And certainly, Waterfront Shores, the level of quality that's been delivered to date, I think speaks to that question. And, going beyond sort of that idea that just the kinds of materials that we will be selecting, that will be an area where, the specifications and that will get to this idea of a life cycle and an end of life, or how long does a material last, and certainly selecting things that extend that lifespan beyond what might be typical, or what a typical failure rate in the market is.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions from me. Thanks.
Thanks, Petra. Ted Watson, do you have any questions?
Yes. Thank you, Bruce, Pat, and Luca for your presentation. And my questions, I think, fall under the category that, with a minimalist design approach, the detailing becomes critical to the success of the final outcome. And some of these have been answered, but was looking for some clarification on some. So the material of the building, of the fins, of the canopies, etc., is a metal. It's a painted metal finish. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then the undersides of the balconies, which when we look up at this tower, which is in some renderings looks very copperish, and in some canopies we see a kind of copper finish. Is there thoughts about what the finish of the undersides of the balconies will be as we look up?
We haven't really done that so much. I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, in my building, it's just painted concrete, and they're light. I don't think we want it to be too dark, like a cave. And so we don't know, but also you don't want to, I mean, what are the choices? It's just adding finishes to the outdoor room, But right now, it's probably just painted concrete or concrete. Like my balcony, the balcony above me is concrete, and it's actually pretty well done, and it keeps it light. So I'm not sure whether we want to have a metal ceiling to the underside of the balcony above, so that I get a bronze ceiling in my balcony or something like that. So yeah. I think the lighting on the balcony is really important, though. And I think that it can be very warm, and really enhance it. Like what I'm hoping for is people actually go out on these balconies. I rarely go out. I rarely. I mean, we had a debate with our clients who goes out on balconies and why and when. Usually too windy or too noisy. So we think our innovation is actually to create the living room, and then what's the ceiling of the living room. Some people in the building have done different things. Again, it relates to the condo corporation and what you can and can't do to your own unit to customize it. I've added finishes on the concrete slab. I have an Ipe deck. It's beautiful.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow up on the curved glass, I think the discussion was around the glass at the base. And this is more of a comment, but I think the glass at the podium level, where it's shown to be curved, that picks up on the lines of the building, I think is an important detail that would be great to see that follow through. And finally, one for Pat, the materiality of the hardscape. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So it could be, I'm trying to think it through. It could be that we do strike a line of pavers that make that curve or make the zigzag or whatever, and then fill in with concrete, because obviously we're not going to do it all with dimensional pavers. Or it could be, we were looking at outside the Guggenheim in Manhattan where they just put in zinc lines and then fill it in with concrete. So some version like that, sort of a sandblasted concrete, would also work pretty well, and that would actually be something that could be taken into the building. And or if it's not concrete, you know, the material like the bound granular, you see it in some places. That could all, like, it's like a Rice Krispie square. That could also be something like that. So there's options, but it needs to be worked out. It really needs to be worked out in conjunction with somebody who would be building it and understanding the, you know, the cost and you know, the technical difficulties of it.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. That's all for me.
Thanks, Ted. I have a couple of technical questions, and officially I have to pass the chair over to you, Ted, while I ask those questions. So,
okay, thank you.
Thanks. A couple technical questions regarding sustainability and you know, detailing to achieve a high performance building. You may have mentioned in the last DRP that the balcony slabs are thermally broken, and I just wanted confirmation that so we don't get that heat, the cold bridge into the living rooms.
That is something that we're still studying, Jennifer. We haven't landed on a hard commitment there.
I think if that's one of the major failures of condos downtown Toronto, we live in a really cold climate, and a cold living room floor is unacceptable in a building that's supposed to be exemplary. But I'm getting into commentary, but so I'll hold that. Has there been any consideration for triple glazing in any of the areas? I see you've got double glazing with a low E coating, but investment, you know, value for return on the energy efficiency, was triple glazing ever considered?
Yeah, there's a lot of considerations there, and the decision was made to prioritize effort in the thing that is delivering the carbon benefit to a far greater extent, which is the geo-exchange.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me. So we'll now close the Q&A session, and we'll move on to comments from the panel members, starting with Eldon.
Thanks, Jennifer. And I'm going to try and keep my comments brief. I just want to state that I really do enjoy the design. I think that there are a lot of great elements, and I think there's a lot of components that really celebrate this building and celebrate this built form in this really important location for Hamilton. The matters, the decision on the lily floor plate, I think is great. I actually think that floor plate results in better unit layouts in comparison to the cylindrical form, and you get more dynamic type of units that I think actually lead to a better quality of life for residents. I think just some small points on the proposal. I again, talking about the form, this kind of this triumphal form at the end. I appreciated the rendering that showed the night view, and it showed the soft light treatment as it relates to the mechanical penthouse. And I appreciate the comments about, you know, keeping it kind of a quiet beacon, but I think there's an opportunity there. This is a harbor location, and not something tacky or something, you know, over the top, but an opportunity that top piece and that light element, you know, could serve as some sort of lit expression or beacon that still kind of reflects that relationship to the water. It's something I think that's worth exploring, that feeds to the narrative and feeds to that recognition of that landmark and being an inspirational built form and having an exceptionalism in that location. I think I did touch on my questions about the facade expression. I think as a review panel, we probably would have benefited from perhaps being provided some options, or maybe even that narrative of how you went through that decision making and coming to that, and even giving us perhaps a couple of options rather than that definitive a final look. Even maybe options that looked at different window ratios, and different wall to window ratios, or percentage glazing, to give the committee an understanding of why you believe that option was the strongest form. And the reason I speak about that is, when I step back and when I look at the proposal and I look at the design, there's a great elegance about it. There's a great prominence about it. But I keep wanting to see something a little bit more that would suggest exceptional, the words exceptional, the words excellence, the words landmark. And I think that when I look at this, it's a great, elegant design, but almost too elegant, even in contrast to the renderings of the adjacent, low-rise built form that have a certain texture, a certain character. It almost seems like it stands out too much, which seems strange because it seems like I'm contradicting myself. But I felt like I wanted to kind of arrive at this location because I'm being drawn and inspired by something that is in the skyline. That was just my thoughts. That's my view, something to think about. I really think that that the progression has been really great, and a lot of great thought, particularly at the ground level. And I'd want to leave that with you. Those are my comments. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Eldon. Over to Tony for your comments.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I want to thank Eldon for some comments, and particularly some notes he made about issues in the panel mandate document. And I'll start this way. First of all, by saying that I think all of us in the panel recognize that improvements have been made that bring much more character and elegance to the look of the building. There's no question about that. I think that's testimony to Bruce and his team for making some extra efforts to come and provide a different look and feel, which I think will be welcomed in the community. But I'll reiterate again, I'm coming from a sustainability lens here. That's why I was on this committee. And I think when you look at the sustainability targets, which certainly have been improved, they're good. There has been some uniqueness perhaps in how they were put together. But I think when you look at a few facts here, given the City of Hamilton's declaration of a climate emergency, given the renewed carbon reduction targets set by the federal government, and given the mandate document that we have here, and the words that Eldon reiterated, landmark and exceptional design elegance and emblematic of the renewal of the harbor. I think when you look at all those factors and you try and put a sustainability lens on that, I think we need to do better than what you've stated. I would say categorically it had to be targeted at zero carbon. I know that there may be some challenges with that, and certainly for people who are on the city staff who are listening to this, there's some opportunity there that I think we need to think about. One of them is that this is the first major development of this area. And I highlighted and discussed this earlier, when you look at the space called the Greenway, I think there's a huge upside and potential there to look at that as your geothermal field that could not only serve this building, but all the buildings that are north and south of that in the future. And I think those have to be considered. I think the point I'm trying to make is we're missing an opportunity here to make this an exceptional piece from a sustainability point of view. I know you've raised the bar from where you were. I'm not questioning that. But some of those metrics that you're using, quite frankly, are maybe having a wrong reference point. I know some others mentioned that, but you looked at some of the energy use intensities. We've got a building in Mohawk that's running at half of that. It's a zero carbon building that didn't cost any more to build than any other conventional institutional building, and the EUI is running at below 60. I mean, it's phenomenal. That's when we had full people in there, not just the last year or so. So I think there's opportunity here, and I think the city has to maybe look at the broader picture. I'm being asked to look at and participate in some community energy initiatives, Hamilton Community Energy, and perhaps this could be part of that somehow. I think we need to think a bit broader that each building has to satisfy its own needs. And I think there's an opportunity here that lends itself towards that to supplement the good things you've done. I'm not questioning the good things that Lucan is. I know that, and I understand the challenges. But maybe the city has to say, we can buff this up a bit and we can contribute to that because we've got other players coming along in the near future who want to fill out this space here. So anyway, just take that into the context of what I'm giving it to, and hopefully others can maybe contribute along that point. But otherwise, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tony. Paula, your comments?
Thank you. I'll keep it really brief. I would just like to reinforce what Tony has already said, that the major focus of the project, the major priority really needs to be sustainability and innovation in sustainability, and an opportunity for Hamilton to have a project that really leads the way. I can't stress that enough. I would like to say I really value the presentation regarding the landscaping. I think it's really helping to create a really powerful public realm. And if the landscaping is realized that along the lines of what has been presented here, it will be really wonderful. I just have one comment in closing, and it pertains to the Urban Design Guidelines checklist. And I note that under item 6.8.2, which reads, utilize bioswale, rain gardens, and permeable paving materials within landscaping, that this is noted as revised will not comply from partially comply. Just asking that perhaps that particular item be revisited. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. David, over to you.
Well, I have to say that I'm a big supporter of how this project is developed. I think that the refinement of the design that's occurred in the particularly the development of the lower podium and its modifications to respond to the choice of the Lily Tower, I think is very successful. I think that the introduction of the curving glass is, as Tad mentioned earlier, I think it's integral to that success, and certainly hope that it continues to be part of the project. I also feel that the refinements that have come about in the general landscape design, and credits to Pat, has been very successful, and I think in general, from an architectural and even the clarity now that's come in terms of the program elements that support the kind of family positive aspects of the project, I think they're all pretty successful. And so I want to commend the effort that's gone on that front. I think I tend to agree, though, on the sustainable commentary of my immediate predecessors, though I am somewhat understanding of the restrictions that come with the commercial application of the environment that you're playing within. And so I have to wonder if the size of I mean, it sounds like the geothermal is the big play here, and that you've somehow limited the field and the size of it, as Tony was referring to. I don't know what is driving that restriction, but I think that seems to be something that's really worth examining a little more fully and seeing if there isn't a way to expand that field in some innovative way. so that you are able to make, even certainly it's commendable that you are also, you have laid down some actual goals more specifically. And I think that's something that we asked and we should commend you for as well. But it just, whether or not the bar is quite high enough, I guess, is where we're all talking. So I think that's all I'll say for now. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Over to you, Calvin.
Thanks, Jennifer. First of all, I think that, the public realm development is really wonderful to see. And I think it helps to address this objective that you heard at the previous meetings about giving the public a kind of sense of this being a friendly building and a friendly space around it. So the development of the public realm and the landscape that Pat presented is hugely important. And combined with the idea of the restaurant and meeting space, really begins to address that public role of the building. I actually really appreciate the location of the restaurant as an animator of the Greenway, because I think the Greenway is a huge part of this project's unique. For Pier 8 altogether, it's a very important kind of key public space that has this theme of integrating nature and environmental objectives throughout the whole project. And it's interesting to me how, I'm not sure you quite expressed it this way, Bruce, but the Lily narrative actually complements the theme of the Greenway to me, where there was this idea in the guidelines about being able to take the kind of east-west expression of this environmental corridor and have it reflected in the building. And I think that Lily form does it in a very kind of elegant and subtle way. And I agree that the Lily form actually does achieve the objective of trying to have these slender views of the building, or slender impression. Because of that form, I think the way the building captures light and shadow in a kind of modulated, ever-changing way is going to be really interesting. One of the other things that came out of the public discussions around the guidelines was this building should make people smile. And I think the narrative is really helping that, but I'm also thinking the way you've developed the penthouse as this kind of landmark element, I think is really successful. And just a suggestion that maybe studying the nature of that soffit material, so it kind of glimmers and glints, might be one of those things that makes people smile. I also agree with my colleagues that the other thing that I think would really achieve this objective of exceptionalism is to be able to declare this as a net zero carbon building, an all electric building. And I'm super excited that you've taken on the geothermal, the geo exchange system. But if we can just push that a little further so we can achieve net zero, I think is very important. In terms of the intent of the guidelines, I believe that the project is generally following the guidelines and is successful in reflecting them. It's interesting, I went down to the site about 2 weeks ago because I hadn't seen the the work on the public realm work along the dockside. And during the guidelines process was kind of agnostic about the idea of a tower here, but I think having seen this presentation and having sort of imagined it when I was on site, I now firmly feel that a tower on this site is appropriate. That's, of course, not a decision of ours. That's a council decision, but really, I think the design is achieving the objectives that we set out for this extraordinary location. So we just have a little bit further to go on the environmental performance of the building. But overall, congratulations. I think it's really come a long way. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. Petra, over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Echoing what the rest of the panel has touched upon regarding sustainability excellence, just emphasizing that both for sustainability excellence and the envelope articulation, really looking beyond what is currently being done in Hamilton as a benchmark for what is considered excellent, and thinking of this building as setting a precedent not just for Hamilton, but also as a landmark building that can speak to what is being done in Canada right now. In terms of the design itself, the introduction of color has been a very great addition, and I was very happy to see the design move away from feeling a little bit colder to introducing that color. One thing that I know will be explored further at the site plan approval stage is going to be the actual materiality, and I do wonder if there could be further studies being done on the different materials that the metal could be. Like, could it be could the metal itself have a specific color? Like, could we explore different colors on this tower? So that's something I know that would be done further in SPA. As for the restaurant, I really appreciate the addition of the restaurant and bringing the public into the building. I understand the difficulty from a security perspective to bring the public into the lobby and up to the rooftop. But just something to consider, could the restaurant possibly be something that could take up a portion of the podium without entering the building's lobby, and from a security perspective, maybe be serviced by a single-story elevator? The waterfront, I have no doubt, will be a destination for Hamiltonians and for people from outside of Hamilton. So having a restaurant with elevated views, I think, is a great opportunity over here, especially a signature restaurant. And Bruce, speaking about balconies, I too do not use a balcony, but that's because I don't have a balcony in my condominium, and I don't miss it. I do not miss it at all. What I instead have is a what would have been a balcony. It's actually a glazed-in room that I use as a greenhouse, and it is growing to be quite a jungle. So I do not think that balconies are necessary, and I would never want to be on a balcony on the 30th story. That's not something that I would want for myself, but I would end it at that.
Thanks, Petra. Ted, comments?
Yes, thank you. So I think the design has really progressed, and it's followed I think, a very linear pathway of refinement. So I'll echo some of the comments of others on that regard. And I think the the idea of this copper hue, I think, is a very positive development as a means to differentiate this building through kind of materiality and particularly through the play of light and shadow. And I think, you know, when as a painted material, thinking about how it can capture some of that variegation of natural material, I think is going to be an important consideration in its refinement and how it will have depth to it. So I encourage you to consider looking into that. The scale and the resolution of the muse and the podium, I think, is very successful from what we saw previously. It's got a very inviting and welcoming feel, and I compliment you on that the development of that space. The restaurant as well, I think, is an extremely positive contribution to this site, and I would echo Calvin's point that, you know, this is a south-facing space that is open to a community green. I think it's a great location for a restaurant, and I think it'll help activate the muse in that community. So I would endorse that location and that use. The landscape design is very compelling, and it creates you know, a texture that creates continuity and ties this entire site together. And the way it's been, you know, kind of eddied and flowed through the podium and the public space, I think, is really clever and quite lovely, and would love to see how those details resolve and integrate with the building design. The commitment to LEED Gold is laudable, and you know, I thank you for making that commitment. I think, you know, committing to something like that is making this project accountable. So we very much appreciate that. Having said that, I would echo Tony and Paula's comments, and I think they captured it really well. The only thing I would add to it is I think it's I think it's a bit unfair that this project is a lightning rod for these questions. I think the real target is the city of Hamilton. I say this at the risk of being asked to leave the design review panel, but I think the city of Hamilton really needs to set some policy. They need to look at what their neighbors are doing in Guelph and Toronto and get their sustainability goals and agenda in place, and so that they're not asking exceptional developments to be meeting high standards of sustainability, but all projects in the city of Hamilton. So we would love a document with some teeth to work with. So I'm hoping that can happen very soon. So the die has been cast, and I think it is an elegant solution. So just looking forward, I think, you know, in terms of the morphology of the material, you know, do these fins actually have more finesse? Do they have facets that pick up the light in a different way? And the reference to John Lyle and Art Deco, you know, always brings to mind a very, you know, a finessed and fluted quality or faceted quality, and can that be part of it? It's interesting, Bruce, that you mentioned the Chrysler building, because it was exactly what I was thinking of as a precedent, how that top really, you know, creates this amazing quality of light and material and detail. And so, you know, it looked like these fins started out as precast, and I guess they've the materials transformed, but the thinking around them seems to be similar to precast. And I'm wondering if the development moving forward is more about the materiality and the detailing that can kind of change that look and feel of it in a more finessed way. The roof, I would, you know, I appreciate the comments about creating that beacon and capturing the light and not letting it spill upwards, but I do feel that the plane on top, to me, feels like it truncates the expression of this building meeting the sky and blending into the atmosphere, and it feels like there could be some hybrid where I feel like that penthouse wants to push through that tower and be revealed, or at least drop light through that so that in the day there is light and there's a lightness to the top of the tower. So I would suggest as you move forward, and you're not there yet, I know there's more to be done, but I would suggest looking at that level to kind of bring the same level of texture and lightness as what's been developed at the podium. I would question the termination of the low podium as well, and it's a tough one because it's how does it fit into the logic of the base and the podium, but perhaps it's an opportunity to give that some more finesse. It seems to just stop. And then finally, and this is a minor point, but the straight wall in the lobby that's opaque that runs on the diagonal and intersects the curtain wall. Everything at the podium at the upper level seems to have this reveal that circumambulates the building and kind of gives it this motion. And the walls of the lobby, when they hit the exterior, I think they could be dematerialized or become more transparent to allow the more fluid feel at the base as well. But I'm getting pretty down into the details. So I'm really excited to see where things go from here, because it's looking to be a very impressive project and development. So thank you all for your efforts.
Thanks, Ted. I have a few comments, and I'll try to summarize and pull together what we've heard tonight. I think we've heard, and we all agree that this is a strong proposal. The design that we're seeing tonight has moved along far from what we saw last time. So it's achieving its objective as an exemplary design excellence. No doubt this will be an elegant solution as it develops further. We've seen some improvements to the character and the refinement of the cladding system. We've seen great development in the scale and development of the Muse as a really habitable outside street. The move from the white approach building to the copper color for me is a really great move. It's warm. It's got some light reflectance, so it's playful. It's also reminiscent of Corten steel. So you know, a bit of Hamilton history and the steel industry. It'll be a refined approach, and look forward to seeing that in development. I love Cal's comment about something that makes people smile. So, you know, just the little bit of sparkle or play with that materiality will be great to see. I appreciated Petra's comment earlier that she wouldn't want to be on a balcony on the 30th floor. So maybe there's an approach where there are no balconies up high, for wind, for life safety, for all sorts of reasons. I think the 3D massing development is very successful. The base, the podium being low and sort of exaggerating that horizontality at the ground plane is a good move. The transition at the 30th floor, I think, is good, and then elegantly reaching up with a more slender tower. I think the massing is a great approach. Bruce, you talked about it, the rooftop being a subtle glow in the skyline, and I think that's absolutely successful. And to your point, Ted, about it maybe not being capped, but maybe more gently touching the sky. I think there's some great, you know, metaphors there that'll lead to a really lovely, gentle solution. On the sustainability front, I think you've heard a pretty clear response from the team that it's great to see LEED Gold commitment. It's great to see the Energy Star and the WELL. It'll be great to see a building that's WELL certified. But I think we do have an opportunity to raise the bar here, and it's one of those points in being exemplary in innovation that I think we can't miss this opportunity to raise the bar. Getting to net zero carbon may not be too difficult, but I leave that to you, but I think it's a totally reasonable ask. Tony's idea of using the Greenway as a geothermal field for the whole campus is brilliant. I think we need to think of this as a campus and not just geothermal for each individual building. I think Paula mentioned exploring wall cladding photovoltaics. I hear that more and more of them are being developed and at more cost-effective deliveries. So maybe that's an opportunity for enhancing the energy performance of the building. Enabling fossil fuels over time, I'd encourage you to eliminate them now, because I think we can. As Ted said earlier, the minimalist approach will, sing with the detailings, and I'm sure, in your capable hands, the detailing will be exquisite, but I look forward to that happening. The curved glass in the podium spaces is so important to the character of that podium space and how much curved glass is used in the rest of the tower. I think it's important to carry the curved glass up and make sure that lily expression doesn't get faceted as it goes up. On the landscaping and in the public realm, we've seen strong development in the texture and the interesting variation of approaches to the ground plane. The addition of the restaurant, I think, is brilliant. I think it'll make an increased public face around the building that is very important. So overall, great to see this development, and I think it can be the landmark and exemplary project that the City of Hamilton hopes for. We now have an opportunity for Bruce and Luca and Pat to respond to any of the comments that they've heard.
I think it was Luca who was coaching us and just saying, we just talked about the process that we've been working within, and it itself is it's outside of my professional experience. Like, I've actually never been at this stage in the life of a commercial project been asked to do so much comprehensive and integrated design thinking in a short period of time. And for me, that's just a fact of the OPA and rezoning that has been proposed, and it's kind of been really it's a real challenge from a whole lot of perspectives, because we're not actually, we're still in a kind of design concept stage. We're not really even at schematic design, like full schematic design with structural, mechanical, all of that. And so we're trying to, we're trying our best to embrace the process, and, having JH3 on, I mean, has always been, you see I see what what transpired, and you know, really is really interesting to me. And I think, you know, in the big picture, I mean, there's also the market in Hamilton for residential on this site. And, you know, all of your comments, I really do appreciate. I think you've been extremely fair and upfront with us. And at the same time, I know that I really do want to see this building built. And so the efficiency of the floor plates and the repetition of the system are part of it, understanding that we're doing a lot of other things on the ground. Like, you can't do every single thing in this commercial project, in this commercial market. And, you know, we've done, and I've been involved in buildings which are very low energy buildings, really, really low, and big buildings, Manitoba Hydro, but they're all government owned buildings, or where the owner of the building has a long-term ownership and pay all the bills and everything like that. In a condominium proposal, it's very, very different. And so, you know, and I definitely want Luca to speak, because we've had this ongoing conversation of how to place this properly within the real context to get the building built. And understanding that, you know, we have a list of things that you asked for that we considered and are not doing as well, which is an interesting thing. What we said, let's really stress what we are doing and how we've allowed the process to guide the work that we did. Like, our assignments in design were very targeted to your comments. Jennifer, you sent them out. We got them. We immediately started tracking the comments. So that's how influential the design review process has been. And we required everybody in our team, and, you know, the developers in particular, you know, the conversations of what is really possible and what is feasible it's a really interesting thing that the design review process has pushed up front. Like, the amount of upfront thinking on this has just been enormous. But, you know, onto the sustainability side, I think that, you know, it's a very challenging thing in a condominium versus even a residential building that's owned by one owner and is rented out. It's a very different thing because of the long-term ownership of it. And so that's what our struggle is. You know, it's not that it's the truth of the project, which is in a particular economy and a context and the market. And we understand, you know, I think our clients really understand that market and have built in it and been very successful. So all I can say is we're doing our best. We're working really, really hard. I really want to thank my team, you know, Francesco and Daniel. You can't see him, but I thank you, and I thank the city for organizing it, because this is one of the most complex front-loaded processes I've ever been through in my life. The other one was in Berlin, where you know, I mean, the other one was in Berlin, where it's really regulated. Anyways, Luca, can you shed, like, how do you feel? You know, we've got this, we've had these conversations. Maybe you can add something and respond to the challenge of sustainability.
Yeah, sorry, my headphones were just cutting out. I think that the 2.5 hour mark is the limit, it seems to be. Yeah, I mean, really great and incisive comments. And, you know, as Bruce said, I think we've been trying to take as much as we can to heart. I guess a couple of sort of ways that we've been looking at it. You know, I think there's this notion of a graph that on one axis is depth and on the other axis is breadth. And the way we interpreted the guidelines is that the focus was on breadth, that there was a lot of intent and a lot of language that the innovation really came from tackling all of the various sustainability issues and trying to elevate them above and beyond what's possible. And in that lens, I think, from my perspective anyway, I think it's difficult to see this as something short of success in terms of how many different things are being tackled. And if we look at sort of the checklist and it's 60 odd items, and reflect that we are, you know, generally conforming to or complying with something like 95% of them, if that was a LEED scorecard, we would be platinum plus, right, in terms of available things that we have gone after. But I think it's a really fair question from both this development and a broader policy perspective to ask, what is the right level? Where should we be on that graph? And lots of different, you could argue that we should be focusing on fewer things and taking them to zero, or you know, a true level of circularity, or you know, true regenerative design, or you could take a broader view, and so I think that tension is really coming through. This idea of so that's one. The other one is, you know, we really struggled with this idea of all electric, and again, in the context of what this development is on day one. And right now, when we run the math, all electric buildings cost more to operate under the current utility structure and the current carbon tax. That will inevitably flip at some point in the next 5 to 10 years. And so how we tackle sort of affordability and how a condo corporation would view what they've been sort of provided with in terms of a design, and whether that is a fair sort of deal that they are incurring potentially higher costs, I think is a valid question that we've been really trying to explore. And again, you could argue that, well, if you drive to passive house levels of energy demand, then even electrifying the remaining element is less cost to operate. But again, then we're back to this graph of, are we going as deep as we can on one thing, or are we going across the board? And so I think that's sort of the 2 or 3 bits and pieces. I did remember that this one question that maybe just to circle back, this idea of durability and sort of the envelope. One of the elements of the LEED sort of strategy is full commissioning across the board, and that would include envelope commissioning. And so that, I think that is innovative, and I think that would deliver and really speak to Petra's question that I reminded myself I didn't get to. So again, really appreciate the feedback. Really, these are the questions that I think the whole market is asking, and rightly so. And yeah, just thank you for that conversation and the ability to respond.
Can we see the movie?
I was just gonna.
Okay, I don't know.
Can I? Sorry, Jennifer. Are we done? You're muted, Jennifer.
Thank you. Yes, we do have a little bit of time. The recording of this panel will be available on the project website by the end of the week, Jennifer Roth tells me. And at this point, Ken, we can pass it over to you. I know you've got some closing comments, but if you want to start with the video, that would be fine too.
I was going to suggest that we just say, I was just going to say some thank yous, and then we close with the video to end off and adjourn, and those who want to stay and watch can watch, and it will end up being part of the record that way.
Sure.
So a big thank you to Waterfront Shores, to Bruce, to Luca, to Pat, for obviously a lot of work that's gone into this, and for following us along in this experimental and relatively innovative process. That I'd also like to thank staff in the planning division, Jennifer Roth, Alyssa Mahood, who've been important in moving this forward, along with the leadership of Jason Thorne and Steve Robichaud. And a special thank you, of course, to Jennifer Mallard and the whole DRP team. Thank you for giving your time to this. It's been most helpful. You've given us a lot to think about and a lot of work moving forward into the next stages of this. As a reminder to the 60 some odd people that are listening and will hopefully watch this recording, the next opportunity for the public to participate will be at the statutory public meeting at Planning Committee. Notice will be posted on the city's webpage, emailed to individuals on the mailing list, and public notice will be put on the sign on the site. We're hoping that will happen relatively quickly. And with that, Thanks all again, and we'll turn it over to the video. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. It ran so smoothly about around 4 o'clock. It was so smooth, but there's a lot of information in there, and we wanted to give you a feeling of kind of. It was really Cal's question about how do you build community, and I think that's where we took real dead aim on that, and so yeah, we've got a long way to go, and we recognize that. And I just say, like, it's an unusual process. I mean, you talk about what's exceptional, the process is exceptional, and hopefully if you have a good process, you might get an exceptional outcome. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Have a
night,
great
everyone.
Thank you,
Good
everyone.
night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.